Nearer, yet and nearer, I can feel the butcher's knife. He is running for his dinner, I am running for my life. The reason I got into hares in the first place was obviously out of my love of animals, and that's where a lot of my artwork comes from anyway. But I remember when I was younger, my mum videotaped this documentary by Attenborough off the TV, and I mean, me and my brother used to love Attenborough programs. I mean, watch them all the time. But there was this one particular one which was, BBC Wildlife Half Hours, and there was one called The Shadow of the Hare, and so I remember the first time I watched it, and it had this amazing introduction because it was nighttime and there were these eyes running through the night and panting, and it was these sort of greyhounds chasing down a hare, and it was quite kind of scary actually. It was quite intense, and then it sort of cut to a shot of a hare on a horizon in front of a huge moon, which turned into a woman, and it was a beautiful shot. I mean, that particular image has stuck with me always, and what it was the goddess Estre transforming from a hare into a woman, and that's part of what the Maddie Prior song speaks about. So this documentary was basically all about the mythology and the history and the natural history of the hare. It talked about the natural history of the hare and sort of the history of it through Britain, really, and paganism and all the rest of it. So this in itself, particularly in recent years, has been hugely important to me, because not only was I obsessed with the hare, but became very interested in druidry and paganism, and this documentary talked about all of it. It spoke about the natural behaviour and all that kind of thing, but then it spoke about Estre, who is the goddess of the moon and new life and rebirth, and is actually where the word Easter comes from. And it spoke about how Easter was originally a pagan festival, and obviously the word estrogen, Estre, it's all from that word, rebirth, new life, and she was said to be able to transform into a hare. And paganism and Estre was a huge part of Britain, and then Christianity came along with the Romans, and obviously anything pagan, or druidic was persecuted, and with that they made a mockery of the celebration. So Easter was, obviously it's supposed to be the resurrection of Christ, and these things, but they made a mockery of the hare, because the hare was a symbol of beauty and strength and life and all the rest of it, which became the Easter bunny. So became this cutesy kind of almost laughable caricature, and the goddess, anything to do with her was also kind of outlawed. So that's why witch burnings, anything pagan was believed to be witchcraft, so the goddess was deemed witchcraft. And so obviously, because she was able to transform into a hare, they burnt hares. They used to throw them in the fires. When it says in the song, so it says in the song, I've been thrown into the fire, but I do not fear it. I shall go into a hare. And so that's basically where my fascination with this song comes from, is this little documentary, because throughout each of these sections where he was talking about all these things with the hare, the history and all the rest of it, each section of the song went with each of those bits. So the first section is just talking about the goddess, and I shall go in the devil's name. That was the sort of the persecution, this is witchcraft now, this is no longer a thing of worship, this is being persecuted, and I'm a symbol of endurance, and I'm a companion to the gods of rebirth, Estre's token. So that's this first sort of section is really speaking about the goddess, and how the hare was almost like a proud of being this amazing symbol, and then it moves on to obviously coursing, which is at the beginning of this program. speaks about, you know, sort of one of the most ancient sports. I mean, thousands of years old. It's coursing, you know, it was, because obviously hares are worldwide. You know, even in Egypt they had the sight hounds and the coursing. So the song then in this section talks about coursing, one of the oldest sports in the world, you know, and it's blood sport, and up until very recently was still practiced, and I'm sure still is really all over the world this is practiced. So I mean, it wasn't just in Britain, but it's a universal kind of thing, this old sport. And this is what it talks about: scent of dog, scent of man, that union between the two, you know, closer, closer. It speaks about, can feel the poacher's knife, he's running for his dinner, I'm running for my life. And it's this kind of, these moments where they clash together, where these man and dog working in unison to hunt down this beautiful creature. And it's kind of, I mean, I find it fascinating because from the hare's perspective, you know, as opposed to from a person's, which is, you know, very interesting. Almost when you know, when Maddie Prior originally sings the song, you know, closer, closer, it's kind of almost as if the animal's panting. You really feel that kind of moment, you know, so it's quite powerful, really. And then we move on to the next section, which is quite a difficult one to understand, particularly if you read it on paper. You know, it's Old English, so it's very bizarre spellings, which is quite a contrast to the rest of the song, really. And I'm still trying to decipher it, I have to admit. Winter wakeneth all my care, nudis vias waxeth bare, oft I seek and morne sir, when it cometh in my thought, of this world is joy, how it getteth all to naught. I've tried understanding it, I do get bits of it, but it's very interesting. And then it kind of moves forward again. It's almost as if we're travelling through history a bit, you know, with the hare. And now it's speaking about, because obviously hares went into a huge decline with the advent of sort of machinery and farming, you know, whereas before, you know, it was all done with scythes and all the rest of it. So it's kind of scythes, and then they would get to the end of the corn. So every year when they did the harvest, as a respect to the hare, in the final crop, the sort of very, very last bit that was cut down, they made a corn cage, which was said to hold the spirit of the hare, because essentially they've cut down their habitat. Hares are of the fields, so it's kind of a yearly tradition. But then with the advent of machinery, those traditions were lost, and in kind of at the same time, the kind of reverence and respect for the animals also went, because you were no longer man and creatures no longer had that close connection. You were no longer sort of working in the land, you know, hands on. It was suddenly a detachment. And I think, you know, it's the same. It can be said with a lot of things now. But it also meant that animals, you know, the hares went into a huge decline because their habitats were being taken down and their leverets were being slaughtered in these machines. You know, and there was no way they could get away. There's no escape from that, you know. So he talks about man sprays no weed. It's not just taking away the weeds. I mean, it's just killing them off. It's destroying their environment altogether. It's really talking about the endurance of the hare and how, you know, like rabbits have warrens and lots of animals have, you know, like badgers have setts. I mean, hares just live out, you know, in the open, really. And most people wouldn't be able to spot them at all. They dig these things called setts. Forms. They lie in their forms, and it's where they kind of make a little dugout and they flatten themselves completely, and that's their only protection. And that's what it speaks about here. It says, no cover but the camouflage from the winter's wild and bitter rage. All our defences in our legs, we run like the wind, the hare says. And it basically, you know, it's talking about how they're really quite strong creatures, and they're beautiful. And you can understand where the sort of respect came in ancient times, you know, for these incredible animals. They're so elusive and mysterious. You know, even out in the open, they live their whole lives out in the open, and yet we never see them, you know, even in East Anglia where they're most common, you know. So, yeah, and then sort of this last bit really talks about the loss of, you know, kind of respect for the creature, and how, you know, it's been pretty hard for the hares. You know, they've been thrown into fires. It says, you know, I've been cursed, I've been despised as a witch with darkest powers. So when the goddess was outlawed, so was the hare. Been hunted, trapped and punished throughout history. In these my darkest hours, I've been thrown into the fire, but I do not fear it. I shall go and till a hare. It purifies and resurrects, I can bear it with sorrow and such mickle care. And so it's almost like it's, although it's sort of lost the respect of the people, it's still quite a proud creature, and you know, it's still as beautiful and mysterious and elusive as ever, whether people see it or not. You know, that's will always be there as long as the hare is there. I've outrun dogs and foxes, I've dodged the tractor wheels. I shall go into a hare. I've survived your persecution and your ever-changing fields. So no matter what, I mean, you know, throughout history, from, you know, the cutting of the corn and, you know, up until tractors, they still persevere. You know, whether we can see them or not, they're still ever strong. And I really like the last line, which is kind of, really talks about the sort of almost, you know, immortality of the hare in some ways. You know, it's I'm a symbol of endurance, running through the mists of time with sorrow and such mickle care. And it really talks, for me, that really comes home to the fact that hares have been a great part of our history, you know, for thousands and thousands of years, really a huge part of our existence and our religion. A huge part of our sort of religions here and all the rest of it. And, you know, even from survival, you know, peasants would hunt hares, you know, to survive, and they've really been a huge part up until recently of our culture. So I like that idea, you know, that it's you know, running through the mists of time. It's kind of still running from history. So that's the end of the song. I've been cursed, I've been despised, as a witch with darkest powers. I shall go until a hare. I've been hunted, trapped and punished in these my darkest hours, with sorrow and such mickle care. I've been thrown into the fire, but I do not fear it. I shall go until a hare. It purifies and resurrects, and I can bear it with sorrow and such mickle care.